Hello, everyone, and welcome. Good day to you all, and a good afternoon from Kuala Lumpur. It is 3:06 p.m. in the afternoon here. It's a very nice day. It's a very nice weather. It's not too hot. It's very pleasant. So we're all in good spirits and high spirits, and we're excited to get this session started. Firstly, let me apologize for the brief delay that we had for this session. We were just waiting on a few more speakers to join us, but they're all here for now. So before I hand over the floor to our facilitator for the session, Elizabeth, I will just be going through a few virtual housekeeping rules to ensure that the session goes smoothly.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Sorry, Elizabeth, I'm still presenting the virtual housekeeping slides. I'll pass it over to you once I quickly go through this. Thank you. So welcome everyone to the Global Tribunal of Women Workers, hosted during the Global South Women's Forum 2022. Sorry, Elizabeth, could you mute your, okay, perfect, thanks. Just give me a few minutes of your time and I'll be presenting the virtual housekeeping rules. Sorry, could you go to the next slide, Paul? Thank you so much. So welcome to the CSO-led discussion on day 2. Our theme for the day is care work, social protection, decent work, and informalization. This is a CSO-led discussion where we have invited our collaborators and colleagues from different feminist and labor rights organizations across the Global South to host conversations and discussions that would act as complementary sources of information to the jury working groups. ERA Asia Pacific is committed to making this an inclusive and safe digital environment and will not tolerate harassment of any kind, including but not limited to deliberate intimidation and sustained disruption of discussion. Participants are obliged to be respectful and refrain from replicating societal prejudices and inequalities. Participants who engage in disruptive behavior may be muted or removed without prior notice. As participants, please turn off your videos and mute your microphones. If you're experiencing slow bandwidth, please close any unnecessary programs and/or applications on your device. Feel free to use the public chat box to engage with one another throughout the session. This session is live streamed on ERA Asia Pacific's YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter page. The recording will be available publicly afterward. Thank you so much for your time. I'm now handing it over to our facilitator for the session, Elizabeth from FIDA Uganda. The floor is yours, Elizabeth. Take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much for opening us up. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, from wherever you are attending from. My name is Elizabeth Kemusha. I work with FIDA Uganda. I'll be moderating this session that Praveen has introduced. Our session is on care work, informalization of women's labor, and decent work. I know that we are already about 10 minutes late, so I'll try as much as possible to keep within this particular time that we got allocated for this particular session. I'd also just like to mention that with me in the room are women's workers that FIDA has done work with, but also on the call is Robina Nagoye of Voices of Labor, who has convened about a number of workers, and we reached out to them and interested them in the Global Tribunal. So in this space, it's not just CSOs, but also the workers that do the work or that suffer these violations and these risks that we will be talking about today. I think we'll straight away get into our discussion without preempting or getting into the details that most of the speakers will be speaking to. Our session is concerning ourselves, is concerning itself with care work, and we know that most of the issues with care work and how women usually perform this work, that it's usually unrecognized, but also because of the economic models that we use in most of our countries, it's not even recognized as work. But also we would like to see in this session for us to link care work, informalization of women's labor, and decent work. And I do hope that Nyambura Ruth will join us, who will be helping us link those three. How does care work, especially that is unpaid, then maybe contribute to informalization of women's labor, and then why and how informalization of women's labor is one of the biggest challenges that we are pushing against in terms of pushing for decent work for women. I will just check in, Anna, if you're still on and if you're able to hear me. I will invite Anna Abunda to set us off, and she will be speaking about particularly decent work, what that means for many women in the global south, especially in casual and informal work. And then Anna will also link us to some of the initiatives that they believe have worked for workers, or what workers have used to fight back in the institution where she comes from. And then we will also look at some of the initiatives that have been successful, but also the ones that have been least successful, because we must recognize, because of the differences in context of our different countries that we come from, there are certain initiatives that will be successful in certain countries, and then in other countries they may not be successful. I think it is important for workers that are on call today or in this session to also just get those tips and strategies. And then also Anna will just share briefly on what some of the workers' demands are from some international bodies that are concerned with decent work and then informalization of women's labor. How we will do it, the speaker will introduce themselves, the institution where they are from, and then take us away. I'd like to request that every speaker uses about 20 minutes, and then we would like to use more of the time to give an opportunity to those that have joined this session, for the speakers in the room also contribute to the conversation. So the other speakers with me, do not worry, you'll have an opportunity to introduce yourself and the institution that you do and the work that you do, and then you will get into speaking to the particular theme you'll be talking to. So Anna, you're welcome. Please take us away.
Good morning, everyone. I am Anne Abunda from Sandigan, Kuwait. I am now currently here in Kuwait. So we have two types of workers here in Kuwait: the documented workers and the undocumented workers. Documented workers are workers with contract, residing in the house of the employers and with valid residence visa, while the casual worker and the informal worker are mostly the undocumented workers. They don't have a contract. They work full-time or part-time. Most of them have absconding case, who ran away from their original employer due to the maltreatment, sexual harassment, verbal abuse, and physical abuse, or rape, or sexual abuse and other labor-related issues, be it unpaid salary or overwork. If you ask them about decent work, the answer will always depend on the nationality. It depends on their visa status or the migration journey they experienced. For example, for Filipino domestic workers, they will say a day off per week, annual paid leave, 12 hours work with rest, on-time salary, free food, clothing and shelter, free medical treatment in case needed, non-confiscation of passport and civil ID, decent treatment. That is because they know what is stated in the domestic workers law. That is the meaning of decent work for them. Although not all knows all the rights stated in the domestic workers law, but somehow they have an idea that there is law that protects them. As of us in Sandigan, Kuwait, we are now concentrating more on raising of awareness on how to assert our rights. However, for other nationalities, most of them doesn't know they have rights. Most of them doesn't even know the existence of the domestic workers law, or perhaps have given up their basic human rights. Although not all in the domestic workers law is being implemented properly, and you really need to have enough courage in order for you to win the battle. We have a case recently about a Sri Lankan domestic worker who doesn't have a residence visa for 10 years. And she's been working with her employer for 10 years with a salary below the minimum, without day off, without vacation, and other violations. When we encouraged her to file a complaint, at the domestic workers department, she said she doesn't want because her employer is good and she treat them decently and that they do not hurt her, because that is what she understands only. She just want to go back to her country. Although we explained to her everything about her rights, about how we are supposed to be treated by the employer, giving us what is written in the domestic workers law, but she insisted that she doesn't want to file a complaint. In asserting our rights, it will always depend on the status of the worker. If she is documented or undocumented. If documented, as long as you know your rights and have enough courage to assert it, then at least you have a high chance of getting your rights. If you are undocumented, especially if you have absconding case, then you have no rights anymore to file a labor complaint. Instead, you will be deported once you submit yourself, making them more vulnerable to abuses and violations, especially if the employer or company is aware about the visa status of the worker. They can easily blackmail them that they will report the worker to the police station. We've been talking about decent work for so long, and only little changes has been realized. Policies and international law had been created. Annual dialogue and discussion is happening over and over in different regions around the world. All sorts of indicators had been constructed. The question is, when can we achieve the real change? The real protection and mechanism that will embody the ideal cause that we are all crying for. We are thankful on the initiatives that this gathering is doing in our behalf, as well as the movement that had been made by many leaders before us. We know that it is no simple nor easy to make the world realize our aspiration, a decent work, especially for women, regardless of color, belief, and origin. The ongoing campaigns and women empowerment is actively participated by various entities. Activity being promoted on the ground, communities, mainstream and social media. But does it reach the workers? Does worker feel the change? Sal Sultan quote, we can see the overcoming social injustice can't be achieved by dividing communities through perceived identities, but rather by coming together and untangling the hidden threads that exist between different groups. This is what is going on right now. The imbalanced approach on how we look at things. Separation of treatment between workers, depending how the political influence and willpower a government holds. When we talk about minimum wage, it will always depend on the nationality. People got the standard government through upper embassies, while other nationals got lower salary. And other nationals who doesn't have embassies are way lower than us. In the region where I belong, the so-called decent treatment, at least although far from the real meaning of decent treatment, is somehow achieved only by group of nationals that has an existing bilateral agreement on the country from the worker's origin. There are encounters with workers that bilateral agreement is not being fully implemented, but deployment of workers continues. Decent work treatment to workers becomes selective and exclusively considered. Again, in the case of Philippines and Kuwait, we need to work hard for it. We from Sandigan, Kuwait, way back in 2013, needs to campaign for moratorium or the suspension of the deployment of domestic workers in Kuwait, because we don't have bilateral agreement and there is no law that protects us. In fact, during that time, no one is talking about domestic workers. We also considered hundreds of cases of domestic workers that is pending in our shelter for years. We even submit a signature campaign to push our government to do something about it. Although they rejected our call, but it resulted to a lot of changes. That simple movement resulted to a lot of changes to push our government to do something about it. It changed the situation of the Filipino domestic workers and even affects other workers, other nationalities. Now, they are working on the bilateral agreement. We have the domestic workers law in 2015 and some changes as well with the policies since we organized the domestic workers in Kuwait. There are many other nationalities who doesn't have bilateral agreement in the country of destinations like Kuwait, yet deploying thousands of domestic workers. There are many nationalities who doesn't have embassies in the destination countries, yet deploying their workers, making the workers' situation more vulnerable. We know that because Sandigan Kuwait is catering cases from all nationalities, not only Filipinos. We know how the worker from Burundi, from Madagascar, from Mali, from Ivory Coast being lured by illegal recruiters, traveling from one country to another country just to reach to Kuwait to work and end up victims of human trafficking and experience abuses, run away and become undocumented for years, and doesn't know how to go back to their country since they don't have documents and they don't have embassies here. And we need to request their travel documents to the nearby country where they have embassy. And you can see the fear in their faces, the unexplainable fear. If they can still go back to the country, not knowing what is happening, or the process because only few can speak English and Arabic. Sandigan Kuwait come up with a lot of strategies through the years. We have the raising of awareness regarding the law and how to assert it, organizing the domestic workers from different nationalities and other vulnerable sectors. Recently, we have the Ethiopian Domestic Workers Association, we have the West African Domestic Workers Association, and we have the Sandigan Kuwait Domestic Workers Association. So organizing, it makes a lot of difference, especially for the situation of the domestic workers. We even formulated our own standard operating procedure in handling cases, since no one is providing an SOP. We have the law, but there is no guidelines on how to assert it. So everyone is lost. So what we did is we create our own standard operating procedure based on the cases that we are encountering or handling. We have weekly Zoom program for those who will file a complaint or who want to know their rights with our case officers or our team in order to guide them, to help them during the process, because you need to have that enough courage and a huge support system to help you. We collaborated with almost all entities that works on the rights of women workers, domestic workers, and married. We encountered a lot of challenges as well, such as language barrier, not full implementation of the law and standard operating procedure, lack of self-esteem to some workers, especially other nationality, lack of interest of workers in coming together to have a stronger voice like organizing. Limitations, we have a lot of limitations. Like if the country of origin of the worker doesn't have strong policies or laws that protects the workers that they deploy, if they don't have the bilateral agreement, if the workers don't have an embassy. The International Labor Organizations defines decent work as employment creation, right at work, social protection, and social dialogue. If you ask a worker, the worker will tell you a different story, a litany of words that breaks human soul. You question who and why these things are happening. The government has protection law, labor and civil right, but this kind of activities continues. Why? In what area we failed as a community that needed to address? The government has a strong and active program against violence in general. We realize and saw the gaps. The government, it is where our work starts. To connect the dot and create a platform between the worker, the law, and employer. Between the country of destination and country of origin, working together for the protection of the domestic workers, for the migrant workers. Support grassroots organizations. Can you imagine the difference if all the stakeholders only work hand in hand? As we always say, together we are stronger. Thank you, everyone. Elizabeth, I think you are muted.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing some of the work that you have been doing, especially with domestic workers. One of the things that come out very strongly is the fact that a lot of the work that they are doing is very informal. And we know that challenges with informal work is that it usually lacks basic even social protection for some of these workers, and most of them are women. And actually that's the situation for us here in Uganda too. I'm pretty sure it's the situation for many of the people on this call today, either who are here as either organizers or workers themselves in terms of domestic work. Maybe something that you've also linked that I think that has come out very strongly is the linkage between migration and then labor, and the fact that this informalization of women's labor does not just stop in the domestic realm, that even when women move because of work, or when they move because they're interested in doing work in other places, still they lack that basic protection, for either to be able to report, to be able to get remedies when their rights are violated. But also when you were starting out, you shared your experience with one of the workers who lacked even any form of documentation to show that they are workers. And when you spoke to them about it, they told you they treat me decently, that they are not violating me, they are not physically assaulting me. So many of the workers, as long as they're not getting beaten by their, physically assaulted by their bosses or employers, it's looked at as decent work. And for me, I think it comes from the continuous cycle. So most of the workers do not know any better. So as long as someone is not physically assaulting them, they do not think that that is in any way indecent work. So thank you very much for highlighting the plight of some of the workers that you have been working with. We'll get back to you. If you do have any questions and you think you may forget, just kindly tap the chat and drop the question. But we have dedicated a lot of the work for this session to a discussion. So do not worry, you'll have an opportunity to speak to that. I will then invite Israt and Poppy, to speak about some of the experiences of workers that they have worked with, but also some of the risks that are associated with informalization of their labor. And most of the workers they work with are women, and how then we can work towards minimizing these risks. We are co-organizers with Israt and Poppy, so they will introduce the institution they are coming from and the work that they do, and then they will speak to this particular subject under this theme. Israt, you're welcome.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for giving me the chance. So now it's our. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I can hear you.
Okay. Welcome and good afternoon, everyone. Today's CSO discussion is called Gap of Decent Work and Informalization in Labor Sector from our side. I am Israt Jahan Poppy. I'm from Karmajibi Nari. Karmajibi Nari is a right-based organization work with mostly for women tribes. Our focus is gender focused. We are gender focused, economic justice, gender rights. So now I just want to say that we want to share a mini video on one of our particular sector where we work with the seafood industries workers. So I will I will try to share it first. If not, then I will just jump on my slide PowerPoint presentation. Yes. Sorry for the inconvenience. There is some technical problem we are facing now. We are trying to solve it as soon as possible.
Loves, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is Nyambura speaking. White feminist politics.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Hello?
My name is Nyambura. Your imagery and everything is very, very white feminist politics.
Hello?
I'm here, like, whatever.
Hello,
Sorry?
Israt.
Is-
Hello, Israt. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I think that
Okay.
I'm going to just jump on my slideshow if there is some problem in screen sharing. So
No, there isn't.
sorry for the
No,
time killing.
no, it's fine. So let me help you quickly. When you choose to share the screen, please also at the bottom left-hand side, choose share sound as well. So screen share, but also choose to share the sound, and then we'll also catch the sound.
But I think now it's time for our
Mm, You must listen to her. You must listen to her because most of the time, everything else is very white supremacist.
Okay. Welcome everybody. Today we are having a CSO-led discussion on gap of decent work and informalization sector. And we already hear from our friend Anna that what is the situation of migrant worker, what is the situation of informalization sector. I think that
Israt, there's a lot of feedback coming from your end.
hello.
There's some feedback coming from your end. I don't know if it's just me experiencing it. It's like there's some people in the background. Kindly just check on that.
No, it's raining here. It's a heavy rain here, so maybe that's the background sound you are hearing.
Okay, please.
Okay. I just like to say that informalization is same in every sector, everywhere in global level. So it's very similar with the other experience. Now we just hear from Anna, but I am going to share our situation in Bangladesh, what is happening in here in few sectors, selective sectors. First of all, let me introduce about my organization. Karmajivi Nari is a women-led right-based organization. It's established in 1991 and is working for ensure women's rights, dignity, power, and authority. Its main focus is gender, labor rights, and economic justice in workplaces. Today, in our CSO-led discussion, we are going to share the gap of decent work in our labor sector. So there are some decent work pillar you are seeing: employment, income opportunity, social insecurity, social dialogue. We are going to share this situation. We select two sector, informal sector and formal sector. Two from informal sector, that is non-clinical care work and personal care work. It's specifically beauty parlor. And from formal sector, it is seafood industry and special economic zone, which is Dhaka export processing zone. As you know, the vast majority of the labor force in Bangladesh is employed in the informal economy. Despite good economic performance, the country is faced with growing informalization. 60% of the labor force is currently employed in the informal sector, which was just 79% in 2002. Workers in the informal sector are characterized by varying degree of exclusion, dependency, and vulnerability. Work in the condition under which most of informalized workers operates are informal, precocious, unhealthy, and unsafe. Work in the care economy is often plagued by informality, even though sectors are formal in nature, and by low or irregular incomes, long working hours, small and undefined workplaces, unsafe and unhealthy working conditions. On the other hand, SEZ, which is the special economic zone, and SPI, which is seafood processing industry, are both formal sector by nature. But in many practices, these are like informal sector. RNG sector is growing informalization through subcontracts. In our country, there is a practice where big factories give subcontract to the middleman, where middlemen hire fewer workers and they complete the whole procedure. Though big factories are obliged to comply the labor law of Bangladesh Labor Act 2006, but these small subcontract factories are not obliged to comply the labor law. And same practice we can see in SPI. Here are some gap of decent work. Now it's employment and income opportunity. You can see the indicators: employment contract, appointment letter and ID card, working hours, and rest and leave. I like to say that we collect this data from our own 3 research work, and you are seeing the data. These are from our research, and those research are impact of COVID-19 on the workers and supplies in seafood processing industry. The second one is workers' right in Bangladesh care economy, decent work, and deficit for personal care and non-clinical health care. And the third one is women worker and labor standard of Dhaka export processing zone. As you can see, seafood food processing industry has only fewer workers who can get the contract, but most of them are lack any contract, which is essential for labor law. In care work, mostly no worker have any kind of contract. And export processing zone, yes, they have a regular contract. Same goes for appointment letter and ID. Seafood processing industries and care work are mostly excluded from this, but export processing zone has regular appointment letter and ID card. As you can see, working hours, rest and leave are very much verified in these sectors, where food processing industries worker has to work more than 8 hours. 95% of workers work for more than 95% of 8 hours of work, and also care worker, especially beauty parlor workers, work non-stop from morning 9 a.m. to 12, sometimes 11 p.m. As you all hear from our witnesses in today's second session, she says that sometimes it takes 11 a.m. from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. to complete her daily work. But in export processing zone, this scenario is much more better. Here, income security and bonus wage increment practices. Seafood processing industries, where 28.9% man workers have wage payment they claim that wage payment dates are not fixed, but 48.6% of women workers said wage payment dates are not fixed. And also 3/4 of workers did not receive any kind of bonus. They don't have any kind of festive bonus or attendance bonus like this. And in care work sector, non-clinical healthcare workers of hospitals are not yet to cover by government declared minimum wages. That means they don't have any minimum wages. And in beauty parlor sector, they don't have any, also they don't have any minimum wages. Also, both sectors don't have any bonus structure, but it is different in export processing zone. And wage due and wage cut is a regular thing in our labor sector. Even in formal sectors, employer can cut their wages if they find any kind of fault, or if they think they need to dominate that worker or that workforce. So they find some excuses to cut their wages. And wage due is also a normal phenomena in many ways. Maternity leave, you can see that informal sectors are very much far away from having maternity leave facilities. And care work sector workers are deprived from these rights, whereas export processing zone workers are lucky enough to get this maternity leave. But there are some dispute in export processing zone with the payment of maternity leave, because many of country many of factory doesn't want to give those women worker any kind of maternity leave payment. They may granted them the leave, but not the payment. Gender specific workplace facilities. As you know, in decent work, you need some gender specific workplace like female toilets, breastfeeding area, or rest area only established for female. But seafood processing industries and care work sector doesn't have any kind of these facilities. Many does not have separated female toilets or breastfeeding spot or breast areas specifically assigned for women workers. Export processing zone is little more better. They have childcare center. Although these factories are these factories have childcare center in paper, but most of them are not open. And as you know, harassment at workplace is mostly common in every sector. It's a formal sector or informal sector. Mental harassment is very common in every sector, and sexual harassment, verbal harassment are also very common in every sector. And women are very much affected by this. Social security, as you know, it is one of the pillar of decent work, and in Bangladesh Labor Act 2006 incorporated several social security and protection for workers, which include provident fund, gratuity, group insurance, maternity benefit. But what is the sad thing is that most workers are unaware about their rights of social security. They don't know that they have the right to right for provident fund or gratuity, informal sector. And in informal sector, it's out of line, because employer never ever mention this kind of rights or this kind of benefit to workers. And for combining work, family, and personal life, as all of you know, it's very much much important to combining work, family, and personal life, because we work for a better life. Labor workers work from day to night, dawn to dusk, to have a better life, to provide their family. But it is very sad, it is very unfortunate that they had to bear the burden of workload, work pressure, and they had to work from dawn to dusk. They don't have sufficient time for their family, for their children, or for their friends, and most of the time many workers get depressed at the end, and they live a unhappy gray life. And another pillar is social dialogue, and which is very important for all workers, because it's a special right where we can voice our demand, and where we can uh, get the rights, where is the chance to get the rights. And the level of unawareness about trade union and their rights is very much high. And as you can see processing industry is higher. Women workers, 38.1% women worker doesn't know that they have they can create a trade union. They have the rights to create a trade union. On the other hand, 5.3% said that yes, they have trade unions in their workplaces. Export processing zone. In export processing zone, 47% workers are unaware, but as it is a special economic zone, it doesn't follow the Bangladesh Labor Act 2006. It has a special law for its own kind, where trade union is not it's prohibited, whether they can exercise worker welfare association. Yeah, it's then some kind of association, but it's not trade union. And in beauty parlor sector, 74% are have no awareness about trade union, and in non-clinical health care workers, it's 56%. And in decision making and dispute settlement, 80% of non-healthcare workers have claimed that employers and management never take their opinion while taking workplace decisions that affect them. Actually, it is the reality in every sector. Even in R&D sector, workers' opinion never reflect in managemental decision making process. And as you can see, the proportion of workers claiming the same in beauty parlor sector is 48%, and the personal negotiation is a kind of dispute settlement, where we know trade union is the legal form to dispute settlement. But we in our labor sector, personal negotiation is established as a dispute settlement mechanism. And in EPZ workers, most of them don't know where to complain about the harassment, about the right violation, about the violence. So this is the overall situation of the informalization and gap of decent work in our selected 4 sectors. And thank you very much. Thank you for hearing me. I'm handing it to Elizabeth. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Israt. I don't know if Poppy is also going to present, or you have presented on their behalf also. Israt, can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah, it's
Yes, is Poppy going to present also, or you have presented on
no,
both
no.
your behalf?
Elizabeth,
Okay.
my name is Israjan Poppy, and I shared our portion from Karmajivi Nari. So it's all for
Okay.
all from Karmajivi Nari.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Israel, for sharing that the context with the workers that you work with in Bangladesh. It's clear that a lot of your workers are in the entertainment, beauty industry, and some of the statements that I've come across before were showing some of these violations that you keep talking about, the wage cuts, the unequal pay, and the lack of protection, which is common with many of the workers in this sector. So thank you very much. Please do not hesitate to drop a comment in the chat. But if you would like to unmute and ask a question, that will be in the next part after Ruth Nyambura speaks. At the opening, I spoke about how these three themes are interrelated, and it's not by mistake that women continue to not be recognized and paid for their care work in the domestic arena, but also it is not a mistake that a lot of the employment that women get into, even with the increase of women in labor participation, is mostly informal. It is not all by mistake. It is something that is organized that way, and it just doesn't happen by mistake. And that's why maybe when we speak about decent work, we cannot fail to talk about care work. We cannot fail to talk about the informalization of women's labor. And before Ruth comes in, I'd like to just share a 10-minute video of one of the workers whose case is ongoing right now through the FIDA Labor Office, for you just to hear firsthand some of the violations that Israel has talked about, but also those earlier that Anna was talking about. So just a second. Share screen. And to open this one, that's usually very high. The volume. Play. No, nothing at the moment. Please do confirm that you can see the video.
Yes, we can see it.
Great.
We can't hear it though.
Can you now hear?
Not yet. Not clear.
Okay. Okay, were you able to see the picture though, the video?
Yes, Elizabeth, the video was very clear. The picture.
Okay. Let me just try to find the volume. No, it works. Can you hear?
Yeah, I think we can now.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm married. I have one kid, a boy, 1 year and 6 months. Yes. I was working at Market Express as a customer care. Market Express, it does shipping and cargo, brings in cargo from the UK, from Dubai to Ghana. The one from that training stuff. Yes, I got complications. I had a heavy bleeding from work because due to carrying of the boxes, if I go to the Lord, you cannot do this box, do this, and capability that consider it because I was with you. And he didn't even try to at least whether he didn't really. So I started getting sick. To the extent that I went to the hospital, they told me that I was a risky mother. I was admitted first at IHK, yes, and then to Akande. By the time when I was admitted in the hospital, I didn't go back to work. So I sent my husband to go and deliver water for my business. Then they told me that they only give me for only 1 month. And since I had taken the June and towards July, I was also giving because I gave back on July 3rd. So June, July, all that time I was really very sick. I could not be able to go to work. And even he didn't say that. So when my husband went to take the letter to him, he delivered the letter to my boss. And my boss told me, you know what, you come down the next day on Monday. So he took it, I think it was on Friday, when they told me to come and pick it on Monday. So when we went there, we were supposed to pick it signed. The guy refused to sign. He just told me, you know what, it is okay. But we only give the leave on only 1 month. So the month of June, what are we going to do for her? So it was about a matter of either life or money. So my husband decided, you know what? Since they had told me to have a bed rest because I was already sick, but I was still working. He told me, you know what? No, it's okay. Just give me what. So we give her whatever we give her. But I want her to rest because it was the doctor who really told us to do what, to rest. So he came back with no signed document or anything. They didn't give me anything. And he told me, I can't take the leave. Only 1 month. So when I got better, after I'd given back, I got better, and then went to work after 2 weeks of June. Yes, towards the end of June. So when I went back, just to find out that, you know what, I had lost that job. No, I wasn't paid at that place. I expected to get some content, just like any other job. You know, when you call, you know, come do your interview, this and this and this. I went, I expected to get some content. I'm not going to get it. After some time, I expected at least to get, you know, they ask you, send us your NSSF numbers, give us your account details or something like that. So at least when you're paying like salary, they deduct NSSF from you. We didn't ask them from us. Then when the time came when they were giving us the money, I expected to sign somewhere, you know what? You actually receive your salary for this month or this month or this month. We were not signing anywhere. So literally the money could come in, he calls in his office, he gives you the money cash, sends you. We as employees, we decided to ask for something that would identify us to a company. So we asked our bosses, at least we don't have t-shirts, we don't have uniform, there's nothing. And usually when we look at other companies, they put on labels, they put the logos and everywhere, logos and everything. But unfortunately for this company, there is nothing at all that attaches it to that particular man. So when they came up with ideas to give to their employers, after 2 days of their issue out, they asked the chief from us. They will take that. We didn't have anything. So if you look at the whole just a few of work without coming back to work. Only for 1 or 2 weeks. So he told me, you've lost your job. First of all, what you were supposed to only have 1 month. Then he asked me, did you get your money? And I told him, no. He told me he's going to give me the money for June. I said, okay with me. So 2 months, you've already lost your job, but then you've already found someone who's going to replace you. I was okay with it, but what hurt me the most is him asking me, like, why is that? If I get back, where is that? Yes, in the first place, the day that I really get back, the already called me and told me, you know what, even back, but you think that's my child. So him asking me if I get back, where is that? So that implies that in the first place, maybe I was spending the whole entire period of pregnancy. Yes. I was really good for it. I think now that person is not a good person. I can really say about that. Because first of all, even when you get sick, he will drag you and drag you until you can no longer do anything. And maybe something that you really force yourself, but then you tell you know what's up, I need to work. Then you tell you go, but then tomorrow I want you back here. He's not considerate at all. Because even around June itself, before I really got that sick, the high blood pressure and sugar level was doing up, with all that he came from asking me to work. This is so weird. I could not be.
Hi, Elizabeth. I'm so sorry to interrupt during the video. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing the video, and apologies that I took this long to respond. But considering that the volume is a little low, maybe you could share the file or a link to the file in the chat for our participants, and we could carry on with the discussion for now. Would that be okay?
Yes, it is. Let me share the link in the chat. This was basically a preamble to the linkages that Ruth Nyambua, our last speaker, is going to make for us. I'll share the link immediately Ruth gets on. The 3 themes that we are talking about: care work, informalization of women's labor, and decent work. So I'd like to welcome Ruth. First, to really thank you for making time. Today is a Sunday. You would have rather been resting, but thank you for accepting to be part of this session that we are having today. Would like to invite you to speak next on the connectedness of care work and informalization, continued informalization of women's labor, and this is for particular women's workers, and this fight for decent work for women. So you're welcome.
Sorry, Ruth seems to have dropped off the call. She's no longer with us.
Oh, too bad. Yeah, we are going to reach out to her, but in the meantime, I think let's begin the session on feedback and questions from anyone on the call that might have a comment, that might have a question for the speakers and the hosts of this session. And when Nyambura gets on the call, she will be helping us make the connectedness. But even before we get into that, I'd just like to mention that women are involved in this kind of work as a systemic thing, and that's why it continues to affect most of the women and the work that we do. That when Anna shared about what the unions are doing, what themselves are doing to support women workers, you can see the resistance comes from the fact that the economic model that we are using right now encourages this kind of labor that is informal because it's cheap labor. And businesses, as much as possible, investors as much as possible, are mostly capitalist, and they would like to invest as little as possible and then be able to harvest as many profits as they can from the little that they have invested in. So it's not something that is happening by mistake, that a lot of women are pushed into this kind of space where most of their work, their labor is informalized, or where most of the work that they do at home is not recognized. So I'd like to open up the chat and for any questions, any comments that you might have for the speakers or for anyone that is on the call. You can drop a comment in the chat, and I can already see Liz Hilton has shared a comment. We'll be able to read the comments later, but please be sure to just raise your hand and then you can unmute and contribute to the conversation. Yes, Priyanthi, you can go right ahead. I can see your hand.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for what you just said about, I'm going to take this off, about the fact that it is not an accident. Because I think you're right. I think it's the capitalist system in hand in hand with the whole patriarchy that actually exploits the substantive inequality and discrimination that puts women, all women, in a vulnerable position in all our societies. So I think that's a point really well taken, and something that we need to keep in mind. I was also very interested in the two presentations that went before with Anna and Israt. And I was thinking, just to make two comments that really struck me about that. Starting from Israt's, going back to Anna's, is the question that I think we make a big distinction between this informal and formal work, and getting women into the formal workplace, or increasing women's economic participation. And I think Anna pointed out very clearly that even in formal formal workplaces like the CZ and the SBI, there are many practices that are that don't come under the decent work agenda, and which are very much like informal sectors. So this informal-formal division is really blurred, and I think that's really important to take into account. And the other thing that I really wanted to say was that, particularly for our jury working group, I think it was very important to learn from the work that Anna and people had done about existing bilateral agreements, and also the presence of country representation in form of diplomatic representation in countries, so that that provided a framework for migrant domestic workers, at least if they wanted to kind of address their rights. But also, I think, pointed out how important it is for awareness creation. And I was just wondering whether some of this awareness creation also has to happen in the context of the sending countries, and how much of that happens within the sending countries before people actually go, and how many women are women's organizations, women's rights organizations are involved in kind of creating awareness about potential women migrant workers and their rights. So that's just my 3 comments.
Thank you so much. I think I agree with you when you talk about awareness being key on workers being able to know, because for most of the workers that we have worked with, we noticed that for them to come up and actually realize that what is happening is a violation usually is after when something very severe, happens. For example, the video that we were playing before, this is a worker who had realized they did not have an ID to associate them with the place of work. They're not remitting their social security fund. They were always paid by cash, and that is usually a methodology used by employers who do not want to remit the social security fund for their workers. She was carrying very heavy stuff at work, even when she was heavily pregnant. But even when allowed to leave the place of work, she knew these were violations, but at the only point she was mentioning, the only point she realized this was something that was serious is when then she lost her child because of the heavy bleeding that came from carrying the heavy stuff from work and working long hours. So I think awareness is key for people to realize that the thing that is happening is not right and it shouldn't be happening. But also secondly, for there to be clear avenues through which they can seek this assistance. I know that in Uganda, the legal processes are not usually very victim friendly because they are very lengthy and usually very expensive if you're looking for a private lawyer to do that for you. About the trade unions, I'll just maybe wait to hear from some of the people on the call and what trade unions are doing in other regions. But I know for Uganda, most of the strong unions have been compromised in many ways. So that's not even an avenue right now that many workers seek to get justice. So thank you very much, Priyanthi, for raising some of those issues that workers continue to face. Hazel, your hand is up. Please go ahead and unmute, and then we shall have Robina next.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. My name is Hazel. I work with Euro Asia Pacific. And I have a question and a comment. It's like tied in between. So from the presentations we've had, it's very evident that ensuring decent work, especially for migrant workers, is neatly tied, to the obligations of the states, the laws that are present between the countries of origin and the countries of work. So the relationships and the laws and everything. But we also know, and as Audre Lorde teaches us, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. So herein comes my question: how then do we begin to think and work around intersectional and inclusive alternatives that hold governments accountable? How do we shift some of these obligations to the states and not the women? So, of course, yes, the women, and from some of yesterday's testimonies, it was very evident that the women are coming together to support each other, to demand for these rights. But then what about the states? Because they should be held accountable. So how do we then begin to think about the alternatives and holding them accountable?
Thank you so much, Hazel. I think anyone on this session can be able to answer. I'm with some workers, like I mentioned here, so they'll also be speaking to that. I don't know if anyone that's going to speak after, so we'll let Robina speak and then Liz. I've noted down the question, and then we can come back to the question that Hazel asks about finding intersectional and alternative means of this survival from all these violation or from this fight towards decent work. How do we take away the responsibility from the same workers that are violated to the state playing their role to protect workers? Yes, Robina?
So much, Elizabeth. Now, if one of the women that has a question, I'm going to give her to us. Thank you very much for taking legal.
Robina, the volume is unclear. Can the person get closer to the gadget? It's a bit unclear.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Session is really interesting. I'm Zamzam Namugeni. I'm a leader from Chibuli. For request to like women legal organizations, really like that they should quickly at this make this social protection maybe in the hospital or maybe sit and find means of coming up with the social. They already are, but it's being recognized. Maybe they are very keen and they make sure they are now active so that these women can be paid by government, like the breastfeeding mask for that unrecognized work. Like when we tell men to pay them according to our culture, still it is a family issue. The men won't recognize that is labor, that are women at home. So my humble request is to ask the women legal organizations in Uganda, social protection act can at least be paying those women housewives and like breastfeeding, children, washing, etc. That's my humble request. It should come out and become an active act by the legal organizations in Uganda, like other governments outside Uganda. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I didn't hear most of it, but I think I caught the most important parts, which is on women's legal organizations going ahead to push for a social protection law in Uganda. I know that social protection continues to be a huge challenge in Uganda for even some of the formal workers in certain sectors. So we've taken note of that too. So thank you very much. And I think even this goes beyond women's legal organizations to collectives that are organizing workers. Because what I think the Global South Workers Tribunal is trying to do is to have us workers convene together, or have workers convene and be able to have a bigger voice together. Because we know the environment, for example, in most countries, not even just in Uganda, it's becoming very difficult for CSOs or NGOs to do their work. So having, building a critical mass that is able to demand from the government to say we need social protection for this sector, women in this sector continue to suffer, I think is something that we can be able to carry from this tribunal. So thank you very, very much. Liz Hilton, please, you can go ahead and unmute.
Thank you. So I'm Liz and I'm speaking from Thailand. I just wanted to say a few small things that we have a collective that we've come together in Thailand. I'm not going to put my video on because it'll take my voice away. Is that okay? We have a dictatorship in Thailand since 2014. And the good thing about having a dictatorship is the very good international NGOs and the very well-behaved people, they go away. So it left us finding which community women are still standing up and fighting. And so we come together as 19 different sectors. So women working on the land, street vendors, all different kind of sectors of women. And together we've found what is our common point on work. And people saying like for the women's work, but it's not just that it's women, as women we're being exploited and abused. It's mainly women of color and women from poor and working class, and especially women if they've crossed borders anywhere. So some of the thing about taking on the state is many of the big agencies and also the trade unions in Thailand, they don't want to confront the state. They want to be part of the state. So they're not useful tools for us. We're going to have to build it and go together. One of the main points we found collectively together that we share is that everyone in the collective is doing the unwaged caring work at home. There's kids and old people and animals and farming. There's a whole lot of unwaged caring work. And if we never get paid for this, when we have to step out of the home to find cash work, that cash work will continue to be low waged and continue to be abusive because the bar is so low that usually we do it for free at home. So we're now trying to, well, we're not trying, we are pushing for the Thai constitution to include recognition of the value of the relationship of caring work that's done in the home. And we want care income paid for that, because we know our governments, they find plenty of money when they need it for a tank or a helicopter or a gun. It's about time they found it for mothers and all other carers doing caring work unwaged. So yeah, I just wanted to say that's how we're going ahead collectively. And it will be, it's a strong battle, but we know it's a long one, but we have time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz, for your contribution to the conversation, especially the continuous fight and noise that many feminist collectives and institutions have made about recognition and payment for care work, and the fact that at the end of the day, because of this continuous cycle, because of this normalization of not paying women for care work, that even when they get out of the homes and get into paid labor, it is still paid poorly, because that's the cycle that then will continue to be encouraged at the end of the day. I would like, before Anna, you come in, I'd like to hear from at least two people to respond to Hazel's question before we lose it on what are the alternatives. And I think she was talking about the fact that many times we rely on the obligations that are tied on the relationships that maybe two countries might have. So for example, if it's workers from Kenya, workers from Mali and Nigeria going to, for example, to Oman to do domestic work, it is usually tied on the relationship that Oman has with this particular country, that where the worker is coming from. And she was wondering, for example, how do we begin to find intersectional and alternative solutions without tying it to that? Is there even a way that can be done without having to tie the obligation to the relationships that the countries have? I hope I'm not diluting your question, Hazel. Maybe we could speak about that, and then after Anna will come in. I saw Anna's hand up. But if Anna, you'd like to respond to that too, please feel free.
Elizabeth, can I speak for?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
I just want to not actually answering Hazel's question, but I want to add and re-summarize something that the alternative is what could be the alternative to minimize the risk, minimize the gap, minimize the violation of women workers in labor sector. It is it's really depend on government interest. If government is really interested to solve this question, solve this problem, they can, because the total thing is a bureaucratic thing that the whole factory owner doesn't want to give the proper right to their workers, and the workers doesn't have any time to raise their work voice. As you know, most of in development country, as it's cheap cheap labor, so they has to work from dawn to dusk. If we can ensure that the workers has the decent work environment, they are working only for 8 hours. They will get more and more time to gather. They can raise their voice then, and not and it's very much we need to combine. We need to get together, make together all the sectors worker in one place, not differently, not separately, because it's an now it's taking a deep root in labor sector that they are not having decent work. They are not there is right violations. So if we want to fight them, we need to get together in from every sector, and we have to make accountable government to solve our problem. We have to, and I just want to say that trade union is very important. Maybe it is corrupted some areas. Maybe there are some problems with establishment of trade unions. The trade union is a place where labor can raise their demand, where labor can exercise their right practice, where labor can make employer or government to for accountable for the right violation. If we don't emphasize on trade union, then I think that there will be some gap, or there will create some gap between workers and governments and employee labor. So it is very much important for me, and also I'm very much I want to say that yeah, Liz, what is they said is true also, that we need to find the alternatives like they find in Thailand now. Maybe we can also exercise them in some extent. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Israt, I kept on losing you, but I caught a bit of what you are saying about getting together as a key factor in fighting for decent work. And I agree with you, because the problems that women face nationally in their countries where they are doing work are the same challenges or even worse that they face when they migrate for labor in other countries. And if you're failing to find solutions at home, then it's even a lot more difficult for you to find solutions away from home. And coming together for me, I think leads us into the next part of the conversation on, I'd like for us to also tap into how are trade unions working in your different regions? Because like I said before, for example, one of the strongest trade unions here is one of flower farms that has lost a bit of strength, but it's still there. It operates. We had one for teachers. We had one for health workers. Those are some of the few strong ones, but over time we see that they also have a challenge. But I'd like to use the example of the flower farm trade union and how it's been working here in Uganda. And how have they been operating in your countries? I'm speaking about this because I think we noticed it's one of the alternatives that we do have, and maybe could also respond to Hazel's question on what are the alternatives that workers have at the moment. If we cannot fight alone at our company, who else can we fight with? Who else are we dialoguing with aside from our fellow workers that are suffering the same violations that we are suffering? Maybe if anyone could speak to that. But Anna, you had your hand up, please. You could kindly unmute and speak.
Yes, hello, Elizabeth. There are a lot of labor destination and labor sending countries who have not signed or ratified the C-190 and C-189. So although here in Kuwait we have the domestic workers law, not yet implemented fully, but we can see that there is a weak penalties for abusers, for those who violated it. One of the challenges as well is there's no freedom of association. We've been talking about it many times. The kafala system. And one of the biggest challenges is, I think, most of the international organizations, they work closely with unions who are not migrant workers centered. Instead of focusing on the grassroots organizations, which is, how can they reach the workers itself? How can the workers be have the courage to air their problems, or to be consulted in the solutions, in solving the problems? If the unions, if the international organizations are focusing on unions who are not working for them. So I think that's one of the, one of the problem now that we are facing. Instead of focusing on grassroots organizations, they are focusing on unions who are not working for the workers themselves. I think that's all, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. I'd like to hear from more people. Any comments, any questions? What are the alternatives? What do workers have to think about away as we get away from the tribunal? What could be our takeaway? What spirit are we living with? Is it the spirit of unionizing? Is it the spirit of lobbying our line ministries? Is it the spirit of organizing with institutions like yourselves on this session today? What are some of the alternatives we are looking at as solutions? Because when we convene, would like for as much as possible to create a platform for workers to share their experience, because I think it's important that there is that space. But I'd also like for us, I know we have a few minutes to the end of the session, to think about what are some of the things we are taking away from this tribunal in terms of fighting for decent work. And I say fighting very deliberately because it's become almost impossible to think that decent work is even something that is provided for in our laws in most of our countries, because of the practices of the different employees that have been so normalized that that many times, even when workers leave a space or a place of work because they've been violated, there is a whole queue altogether of those that are ready to take up that work. And I know it's not something that is happening by mistake again, because of the poverty, lack of social protection for most of the poor people in most of our countries, that we find ourselves having to take up the most precarious jobs to be able to survive, so that you're not living debt on debt, to be able to pay school fees, to be able to cater to your sick children, to be able to cater to your family. So we are left in this cycle continuously without a solution. So I'd like to hear from you. What are some of the solutions we are looking at as workers, as organizers, as institutions? What do we take away from this session of this tribunal that we could work with in terms of solving the problems that we have highlighted for the last 1 hour and 40 minutes? Or perhaps for anyone to share what they've been doing that has worked. I know, for example, at FIDA, we lobbied our capital city council to offer us space to be able to work, open up a labor office. And this labor office has been helping many of our clients fast track some of their cases, because of how we know the backlog of cases is in many courts. So this labor desk uses the industrial court to, for example, push for solutions, demand for pay, because most of the workers, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic and everything it has left, or it keeps leaving behind in our regions, many workers were either laid off without pay, or by the time COVID-19 came, they had not been paid for months. So those are some of the cases that we've been using, and the industrial court has been very, very good in helping women find some semblance of justice and hope that the violations they face are going to be solved by the systems that are already in place. Of course, we can't take away the challenges that are associated with the court system, or sometimes the worker does not even have transport to get them to the industrial court for the hearing. And even when there's going to be a solution out of that. So that's what has, for example, worked for us. I'm seeing Robina, you can kindly unmute and share with us what has worked for you that maybe someone on this session could take away for their collectives or institutions.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I've been carefully listening to the discussion, very interesting. Now, one of the things that has worked, but which I feel is we still need to continue doing is, you talked about the building the collective power of workers. And in Uganda here, I would still say we have a challenge. Unions are not yet really that strong. You mentioned some unions like in the flower farm, the health sector, and education, but those are just few. And we are having very few unions that are organizing the informal economy. And you know that most of our women are actually now overrepresented in the informal economy. Yes, much as we have some few unions like two, that are purely organizing the informal economy, like the market, the Uganda market, the right workers, the Uganda market employees, and I think there's one for the creative and performing artists. Most of the unions have been organized in the formal sector. And in the informal economy is where you're seeing a lot of precarious work, a lot of very, very underpaid work, but the issue of representation is still lacking. So one of the things we still need to do is to push for a legal reform that does not only push away informal economy, but that recognizes and protects workers within the informal economy. Currently, in as much as some unions have now woken up and they're trying to embrace workers from the informal sector, there are still challenges to do with the law. For example, the Labor Unions Act only recognizes employees who have a defined contract of service. It's the only, it only gives the right of unionization to employees. Now, what happens to the own account workers, to our women? Most of them are self-employed, but are facing many challenges in their workplaces. Does it mean they don't have a right to form and join a labor union? So those are some of the things that we need to advocate for. Can the law be, can we have legal reforms that recognize informal economy? But some of the things that are working is still building the coalitional power between civil society and trade unions, because that is something that is still on the lower side. You find sometimes trade unions seem to work so much in isolation of the civil society, and yet actually their coalitional power could compensate for their weaker associational power at the moment. So if the civil society can start embracing to work with the trade unions, build their capacity, especially in organizing, like right now we are having very many new forms of work, and it needs more more innovative ways of organizing them. So if they can be a bigger if we can continue building a coalition between civil society and trade unions, and we have those partnerships, and we see how we can build the capacity of those very trade unions that are on the ground and they're organizing these workers. For example, we could even actually influence their collective bargaining agreements to include gender-friendly clauses within their collective bargaining agreements with the employers. So that is my contribution.
Thank you so much, Robina, for sharing on what works. I hear you when you say legal reform. Of course, we cannot work in a vacuum. I know there have been instances when we've had legal reform and it still didn't work. But I think for the case of workers, because we are working with a lot of private sector and investors, and they will, as much as possible, try to run away from responsibility. So if it's written somewhere as a responsibility of a worker and a responsibility of an employer, it's a starting point for many institutions that are supporting workers, that are organizing with workers. So thank you so much, Robina, for that. Nazma, you can go ahead and unmute.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you all, sister, sharing the experience and also the presentation. I think because I listen all of them and I also agree with many issues, but the things I think if we really want to overcome and the informal sector or migration, women's workers, I think women-led union is very important and women should be. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Because I think it's a women's lead organization is very important and women should be organized, the migrant workers association or whatever. And also we need to be social movement and we need to be more our voice and our action, because we know the UN has so much guideline, different policy, even the country bilateral agreement with the different country. In my country also doesn't have so many things for the informal workers or migrant workers or any. Only we have some formal workers, but the percentage is very low. But most of the workers are women working like maternity protection, the job contract, wages and living wages. We have so many issues. Even the COVID time, we have so many things are in vulnerable situation we were facing. So in this regard, unpaid is always issues, and nobody's thinking that women are giving a lot of value. Even we don't have the gender-based violence law, the ILO Convention 190. So many things and so many areas we are on the weak. So that is why I think we need to be big, strong women's platform across the world. Maybe we can do one action, one in a day, and we can have some more things too. Because if we are not raising our voice, if we are not fighting for us, because this capitalism never will be listened to us, because they are every day creating new form, new system, and new idea and thought, which is always going for exploitation, going for vulnerability of women. So that's what we need to do. And also the migrant workers. Without them, many countries cannot survive. Even we talk about the high luxury fashion brand and whoever, they also come to our country, and the people who are producing for them and at home-based workers, contractual or without contract, piece rate, but they are not taken sufficient. But when they sell these goods and sell these things, it's so expensive and luxury items and everywhere and so many things. And everything is done by women, but women has no recognition. Women has no dignity and respect. So these are the things we need to talk more and more and dialogue, because even the UN and a lot of people are talking about the union and unionization. And one of the sister also mentioned about that, but in reality, they're not working with women. So these are the issue. Without our voice, without our fight, we can't do. So that is the one of the action we need to be created, and we need to be fight for our betterment, because being a woman, how long we have to be behind and how long people will be. And also women are mostly in the trade union movement, always thinking we are like a second-tier leadership. When then our brother, the leader, they want to use us for their protection and things. We don't want to be that. We have that quality and we need to show the quality. So let's work together and make big voice raising system, because otherwise we cannot do anything. Thank you, sister.
Thank you so much, Nazma. Your message is clear on working together. I think now more than ever, it's almost impossible for one group of people, one group of feminists to work alone. I think the call from Nazma is on collective action. And I think that's why this global tribunal in the first place came into place. I don't know if anyone in the room here has a comment. We only have 8 minutes to the end of this session. But if anyone else still has a comment, especially on what our takeaway can be in terms of alternatives for workers, the session has clearly showed us that across the board, women's labor continues to be informalized, and that it's a whole systemic thing, and that means that we must find systemic solutions to this problem, and that will not take a day or a week or a month, and it's not going to take one institution or one collective. It's going to be many of us. I don't know if anyone in the room has a comment or anyone in the chat. I saw your comment, Liz Hilton, before on the fact that unwaged work of care for the family must be recognized and paid, and that you have joined a campaign for a care income for mothers and other carers. And one of the reasons is that you believe while must do domestic work, childcare, farming, and other caring work for free at home, our situation when we do the same work outside the home, it will still stay low-waged, precarious, and undervalued. That you're looking for decent work for all work, including a living wage for the work that women do in our homes, starting with a care income. And you're saying that governments must find money. If governments find money for guns and war, why not money for women workers instead? Maybe then we can refuse those low-waged jobs that cause us so much harm. Thank you so much, Liz. I don't know if we still have any more comments. We have about 6 minutes. If you do have a comment in a minute, this is your opportunity. I see no hand, and I think we've exhausted all the comments. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you. I know it's very difficult to do work on Sunday. For us here, it's in the morning and the weather is really bad. So I'm grateful for everyone that has joined. Ishrat was talking about it being raining in Bangladesh at the moment. So thank you so much for everyone that has made time for this session. Thank you for everyone that has signed up for this particular session. I'd like to encourage us to check out our socials and register for other sessions also. There's so much interesting things that we could learn from each other. There's so much solidarity and sisterhood that we could get from groups outside our own regions to help us organize better. But also, I think what this Global South Workers Tribunal does is a recognition that Global South women workers are present in the work and they deserve to be paid and treated decently in their different spaces, not just by the employers, but for the government to recognize the role that they are supposed to play in ensuring decent work for especially women and the work that they do. Thank you so much to the comms and support team for supporting us through this whole session. This is not a very easy job, I can see, but thank you for also being very patient with us and making sure that we are not hacked and that this session goes on smoothly. Catch you in other sessions. Please do not forget to share your concerns, your comments, and your questions on Twitter. If you can follow Twitter. You can follow FIDA Uganda. You can follow Asian Pacific. You can follow many other institutions that are part of this global tribunal. Be able to share your thoughts with us. Otherwise, bye-bye. Have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a good night from us. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. The nice
Thank you, everyone.
moderation, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Tony.
Bye.
Bye, Elizabeth. Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye and you take care.
What am I muting? Okay. Bye. What do you think that